Welcome to the Great Man Within podcast. Every episode is designed to help you discover and live the great man within you. Hey fellas, I am super excited to share with you that my second book, On Purpose Leadership, is now officially available for pre-sale on all of the major online retailers. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you buy books. On Purpose Leadership is a book about mastering the art of leading yourself so that you can inspire and impact others. Now, I wrote this book because in my work over the last few years with some of the top leaders in their industries, I found that there was this common theme of leaders asking me the same questions. How do I get my people to do more? How do I get them to deliver results? How do I get them to change? How do I get them to act with urgency? And what I found is that most of the leaders were focused in the wrong direction. They were trying to change the behavior of their people before they'd mastered the art of leading their own behavior. Many of these leaders were embodying the same troubling behaviors that they wished to change in the people that they led. And so this is a book for the leader who realizes that everything starts with you. And in the book, I dive deep into how to find purpose in your life that you can bring to your work on a daily basis, how to develop and design principles that guide your behavior on a daily basis. An example of a principle that we talk about on the show quite often is a great man creates environments where he and those he cares about can thrive. That can give you guidance when you're making decisions that inform the future of your work, your family life, or anything that matters to you. And in the book, I talk about how to develop plans and daily practices that facilitate you living a life of purpose and meaning from a place of your greatest energy. This is a book that the leader who demands both success and fulfillment would want to read. So you can go on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, all the other places that you buy books, and you can pre-order On Purpose Leadership. It will be available for you on September 22nd. It will drop ship. And if you pre-order that, I want you to send me your receipt to Dominic@DominicQ.com. Send me your receipt to Dominic@DominicQ.com, the proof of purchase, because in the next few weeks, we're going to be sending out free bonuses that supplement the book itself, allowing you to go deeper into the work, some meditations, some free worksheets that allow you to put the book into practice. So please send me your receipt at Dominic@DominicQ.com. What's up, fellas? Today we are talking about one of the most powerful and fundamental and philosophical mindset shifts that you can make on your inner work journey. We're talking about simplifying your life through the disciplined pursuit of less. And we are going to be drawing upon the wisdom of one of my favorite books, Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And I'm going to link that in the show notes. Essentialism was one of the most influential books on my inner work journey. I think I picked it up right when it came out about 6 years ago. And through the philosophy of learning how to do less, it brought me closer to my purpose. And it showed me how much simpler and more joyful life could be, although the path to getting there is more painful than you would expect, because giving up on being busy, giving up on being frenetic, giving up on the energy of using fear and doing to run your life, surprisingly, is harder than you would think, because there is strong chemical addiction in our body that keeps us acting in that state of being. So I want to unpack a few of the most important points from that book so that you can get on your inner work journey around the disciplined pursuit of less. But before we get there, the reason why I'm finding this so important and timely to share with you is for a few reasons. First, in the Great Man Mastermind, where there are 22 of us, 21 men that I'm helping lead over the course of this next year to discover and live the great man within them, I found that a theme over these last few weeks is that many of these guys who are busy, high performers are finding it difficult to balance all of the many commitments they have in their lives. They're in demand. They have a big appetite for life. They like a lot of things on their shoulders. And after a while, the heavy is the head that wears the crown. Let's just put it that way. And they find themselves stretched too thin. Even though they want to do a lot, they find themselves burdened by that. and find themselves in a place of not optimal feeling, a non-optimal performance, and too big of a weight. So first of all, when the group is feeling something, I know our audience is feeling something. So I'm constantly bringing these conversations to you. The second thing is, this is my first time sitting behind the microphone in 2 weeks, which doesn't sound like a long time. But you have to understand, for the past 4 or 5 months, I've been podcasting at a minimum 2 or 3 times a week. And in some cases, for a period of 2 months, I was doing daily episodes right at the beginning of quarantine. And the reason why I haven't sat down behind the mic in over 2 weeks is because I finally took a week of vacation last week, like a full week away with no responsibilities, where I went to nature and spent some time alone doing all of my favorite things. And in order to prep for that, I decided to record a number of podcasts in the last couple of weeks so that I could have you guys taken care of while I was gone. Now, here's the thing. I have oriented my life in such a way that I love my work. Even the podcast, which is a responsibility, 99% of it I love doing. I don't love the show notes. I don't love the logistics of posting and all that stuff and, social media, the publication or promotion. I'm not in love with that stuff. But the essence of my work and the clients who I serve, the mastermind who I support, the webinars I run for my corporate clients, I get to choose who I work with. I get to be creative. I get to choose what work I want to do. So my life feels pretty damn good. And so I've gotten into this habit over the last year or so of not taking extended time off, because the good news is I love what I'm doing. But I didn't realize how much I needed time away from responsibilities of all kinds until I took that week off last week. It had been since July of 2019 when I went to Colorado, rented a house with no Wi-Fi or cell service so I could just spend 7 days on my own in solitude and get some deep thinking done. And that's where the vision for getting 10 million men on a path of doing inner work over the next 10 years to discover and live the great man within them, that's where that came from. Right? It was giving myself the space and the time to pull back the lens where that big vision came from. And I'd forgotten that it was that space and that time that allowed for that clarity to come into focus. So this past week, I went down to Old Fort, North Carolina, which is about 2 hours, I think, west of Charlotte. It's near Asheville. I stayed basically in the area of Pisgah National Forest. I'm not sure if I'm even saying that correctly, but I believe it's Pisgah. It's spelled Pisgah. And I rented this house in seclusion, which is one of the reasons why I felt safe traveling. I was masked up everywhere I went, but I didn't really interact with anybody. I had this house with this beautiful creek that streamed down the left side of the house. I could hear the creek every day. I had this grass front yard that I sat out on my porch and had coffee every morning watching wild turkeys graze in the front yard. If you've ever been down to this part of North Carolina, there's like the lush and dense amount of forest that's around you. It's just like overwhelmingly beautiful with greenery and nature and animals, and just being able to connect with that as a person who spends most of his time in the city. It's like a shower for the soul. Spending 1 week in nature is like a shower for my soul. And every day that I had a chance to do all of the things that I love, like getting 8 hours of sleep, like meditating longer than I typically would on a given day here, meditating multiple times a day, hiking 6, 10, 12 miles for 5 or 6, I think I did 6 days of the 7 I was there. I did about 6 to 12 miles of hiking every day, of reading books that nourish my soul, of journaling, and of watching one of my favorite shows of all time. I've gotten back on the kick of watching Lost. I'll watch an episode or two of those at the end of the day to stimulate like my mystical thinking, magical thinking, to be swept off into a great narrative of drama, of storytelling. And what was fascinating was as each day went by, living that kind of life, I found how nourished my soul was. Like how much more alive I felt, how much more in love with my life I felt, how much more my tank was filled. And without setting out my mind to think about anything business oriented, some of the biggest ideas I've had yet just came to me without effort, with no consternation. They came to me like a bolt of lightning, or in some cases a lot more subtler. They just came right into my mind. And when I pulled open Essentialism today, it's funny, I turned to one of the pages in the book. It's chapter 5, and there's a quote here from Pablo Picasso. And his quote is, "Without great solitude, no serious work is possible." Think about that. Without great solitude, no serious work is possible. Now, I was just in solitude for the past week on my own. And I recognize that some of you, your life situations don't allow for that level of solitude, at least right yet. Maybe you have families and kids and loved ones you need to care for. And we'll talk about how you can bring solitude into a daily practice, even if it's just for 5 minutes. But this concept of without solitude, great solitude, no great work is possible. It was actually reinforced yesterday when I did an interview for an upcoming podcast, which you guys are going to love, with my buddy George Bryant. Now, George Bryant has achieved many of the things that many of us would hope to, like maybe even dream of accomplishing before the end of our lives. He's had a New York Times best-selling book called The Paleo Kitchen, which I believe was on the New York Times bestseller list for 22 straight weeks. It hit his high as number 4. He developed a health app that was the number 1 health app of the year named by Apple in the year of 2015. He's held a world record in a physical accomplishment, a box jump. He's been the world's highest paid digital marketer. So he's consulted with brands like Adidas and Reebok. If you know Vital Proteins, which is seen in Whole Foods, he's helped with that. He's helped Aubrey Marcus launch his book. I don't know if it's Own the Day or Dominate the Day, which became a bestseller in a number of regards. Like, George has accomplished many of the things before the age of 40 that many of us would hope to achieve. But as you'll hear in that episode, which is going to be coming out in a few weeks, George felt miserable throughout all of those accomplishments because he was running around trying to fill a void on the inside that no amount of success could ever fill. And so a big part of his story is bulimia. A big part of his story is suicidal tendencies and thoughts. And when I asked him yesterday about his journey, because we've become connected over this last year, where he's fallen in love with his life, with the process of living on a daily basis, and by doing less, which allows him to accomplish bigger and more powerful and important things that he actually takes joy in now, versus these empty accomplishments that he could never enjoy. And I asked him, what is the future of your inner work? And he said, a big part of my inner work is solitude. He said, I was afraid to do less in my life before. I was afraid to scale back the amount of work I was doing, these 16, 18-hour days where he had to be hospitalized because of adrenal fatigue. This was when he was working on getting his book to become a New York Times bestseller. For a 9-month period of time, he was exhausting himself, working out multiple times a day, live streaming, building a followership of 1 million followers. I think it was on Facebook, in order to get this thing promoted. And he succeeded in many of those regards, but he had to get hospitalized because he burnt himself out in the process. And he said that he was afraid to scale it back. He was afraid to do less because his measuring stick was broken. His measuring stick was all based on output, accomplishments, like these end results, climbing mountains and slaying dragons. We've talked about this on this show many times before, and he enjoyed none of it. It was only when he refocused his attention on doing less, but more of the things that mattered and filled his soul, has he been able to find stability and peace in his life, love in his life. And you better watch out for this fucking guy, because the stuff he's creating now, I'm on the inside because I'm paying multiple thousands of dollars a month to be a part of his mastermind, because I believe in this guy and his vision for marketing, his vision for heart-centered marketing, for building community and tribe. Like, this guy is going to be creating some massive shifts. But it was only through his ability to look at doing less so that he could accomplish more. So that brings me to the book of Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by Greg McKeown. And I want to just really hone in on the model that he has within the first 10 pages of the book, where he puts a contrast model up of what a non-essentialist is, what a non-essentialist thinks, does, and gets in his life, and what an essentialist thinks, does, and gets in his life. And let's talk about some of the key distinctions because, and I want you to get really clear about this for yourself. If you are encumbered by the amount of responsibilities you have in your life, then the reason why you've brought those responsibilities in, all of those things in, is because you are seeking purpose. You are seeking connection to the thing that will make you feel alive and lit up in your life. And each of the things you have said yes to, each of those responsibilities have been your best attempt at getting closer to that. But over the course of time, with each of those things you've added to the weight of your shoulders, you're realizing you're getting further and further away from center. What I have realized over the course of these last 10 years is that as I strip away these responsibilities and the things that I've done, of the many things I've said yes to, I've actually gotten closer and closer to my purpose. As I've done less, my life has gotten better because I'm getting to the core of what matters most in my life. I say no far more often than I say yes now. And that is a liberating feeling because what I say yes to, it's invigorating, it's enlightening, and it's inspiring. And I know that's what you want for yourself too. So take on this idea of doing less so that you can get more in your life. So here's what a non-essentialist thinks versus what an essentialist thinks. A non-essentialist first is all things to all people, and an essentialist does less but better. A non-essentialist thinks, I have to do this. An essentialist says, I choose to do this. A non-essentialist thinks, everything that I'm doing is important. I have to do all these things on my to-do list. While the essentialist says, only a few things really matter. The non-essentialist thinks, how can I fit everything in? While the essentialist thinks, what are the trade-offs? Now, what I've come to learn through my own life and through leading other men is the reason why we fall into this non-essentialist trap of everything's important and I have to do all of the things on my to-do list is because our bodies get addicted to the chemicals, to the emotions of operating in fear, operating in anxiety, because those chemicals can be quite energizing until we exhaust ourselves. So it becomes this repetitive cycle of boom, bust, boom, bust, boom, bust. And over the course of time, it doesn't feel very good. We get stressed out. We get tired. We get resentful. We come home to the most important people in our lives and we have empty tanks. But because we have conditioned ourselves to needing that fuel, to wean off of it takes time. Takes going through potentially a feeling of hitting a dip, a feelings of lack of motivation, so that we can transcend. It's almost like it's almost like withdrawal coming off of a drug, because quite frankly, these are chemicals in our body. Those basically like winning yourself off of a drug. The short-term feeling may not be great. It may be something that causes you pain in the short term. But if you're committed to living a life of an essentialist who knows what only a few things are that matter so you can feel joy in that, then the juice is worth the squeeze. You're going to have to be willing to go through that gauntlet. What a non-essentialist does, a non-essentialist is the undisciplined pursuit of more. The undisciplined pursuit of more, while the essentialist does the disciplined pursuit of less. You get that? The undisciplined pursuit of saying yes to more is a non-essentialist. And then the essentialist is the one who says, I will be disciplined in pairing, in pruning, so that I can whittle it down to the essentials. The non-essentialist reacts to what is most pressing, while the essentialist pauses to discern what really matters. The non-essentialist says yes to people without really thinking. Yes to the meetings. yes to the social activities, versus pausing as the disciplined pursuit of less would do and saying no to everything except the essential. The non-essentialist tries to force execution at the last moment, right? Like waiting to the very end, procrastinating and using the fear of missing the deadline, versus the essentialist removes obstacles to make execution easy, to feel fluid. And again, that requires weaning yourself off of the chemical addiction that procrastination allows you, so that when it comes to that like 12th hour, that 11th hour, that you're not needing that fear to fuel your tank. Finally, what the non-essentialist gets in his life versus what the essentialist gets. The non-essentialist lives a life that does not satisfy. I certainly know what that feels like. I know that you do too. But the essentialist lives a life that really matters. Like, can you associate into that right now? Like, what it means to live a life that matters? That every day that you're waking up, you know that your contributions make a difference in your life, in your clients' lives, in your family's lives, in your community's lives, whoever's lives that matters to you. Can you imagine every day knowing on some level that you're living a life that really, truly does matter? And if you're not feeling that right now, it doesn't mean that you need to despair. It just means that there's motivation here for you to connect to the possibility and potential for you to live a life like that. The non-essentialist takes on way too much, and then work and life suffers. The essentialist chooses carefully in order to do great work. The non-essentialist feels out of control. The essentialist feels a daily sense of control. The non-essentialist is unsure of whether the right things are getting done. The essentialist absolutely knows with certainty that he's getting the right things done. And finally, the non-essentialist feels overwhelmed and exhausted, while the essentialist experiences joy in the journey. And that last point about experiencing joy in the journey is the exclamation point. Now, I've had to do an ungodly amount of work to come to the realization that I'm allowed to enjoy my life on a daily basis. I'm not talking about some forced joy, some feeling of like I should be grateful for my life, but to actually like live every one of my days where I feel my heart swell, where I feel like a tear come to my eye, where I feel shivers coming down my spine, or energy shooting down the back of my head and across my shoulders from being inspired on a daily basis because of how I'm living my life. That happens now. And it's actually taken me some time to adjust to that, because there have been days as I've been building my life like this where I have felt almost guilty for not, quote, doing more work. But the reality is that when I've lived my life in this way, I can produce magic in 15 minutes that I couldn't even touch in the 4 hours I would have dedicated doing it in the way of my old being. I shared this story with the men in my mastermind when we did our first immersion, which was a 4 hours on 2 consecutive days back in May. Now, I was developing the curriculum for those 8 consecutive hours, or those 8 total hours. And when I was trying to go about it from a place of work, from a place of grind, from a place of just doing it the way I used to do it, I came up short and empty-handed. When I started to bring joy into my life by meditating, working out, journaling, reading books that nourished my soul, I came up with the first 4 hours of content in 15 minutes. It just, boom, downloaded into me in a meditation, and the first 4 hours were done. And then I decided to do the same thing for the second day, and then bang, 15 minutes, and I had the next 4 hours done of curriculum. The old version of me would have taken a minimum of 8 to 10 hours to develop those 2 days. Minimum. And the magic that those men experienced would have been a fraction of it. So I've had to come to realize that when I am living a life of less, when I am spending more and more time around the things that nourish my soul, then I produce better work in a shockingly short period of time. Now, I want to acknowledge the fact that many of you, or you who's listening right now, may not have a life that you're completely in control of. You may work for a corporate organization. You may not be a business owner. And there are certain things that are out of your control. I certainly lived 15 years of that. I know what that's like. Some of you may have families and other responsibilities where you have very little alone time. What I have found for men in my mastermind or other men that I've coached that have families, I found for myself when I was working at Prudential for 15 years in a corporate environment, that all it took was a commitment and a willingness to want to do less, to go on the path of figuring out how to whittle down what I said yes and no to build time into my calendar during the workday, even if it was just 5 minutes of buffer time on my calendar where no one could touch me, where I just decided to sit in stillness throughout my days, that it eventually mushroomed to 10 or 15 minutes a day. And then soon I was finding I was meditating during my lunch break in my office or walking around the city with walking meditations. And many of the men in their lives, in our lives, have figured out how to do the same with their own creative measures. But the first step is deciding that your life right now is not organized in a way that allows you to hone in on the things that light you up. By doing less, you actually get to achieve and feel more. So this is your opportunity to choose the path that you want to walk forward into the future. Do you want to walk the path of a non-essentialist who basically gives whatever life throws at him, or living the disciplined life of less as the essentialist who gets to live a life that really matters, who experiences joy in the process, who whittles away that which does not serve and moves closer and closer to the core of who your being is? I encourage you to check out Essentialism by Greg McKeown. I'm going to link that in the show notes. And as always, if this is an episode that really resonated with you, let us know. Let me know by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, pointing to this episode so that someone else who is also in need of hearing this message can listen to your words and inspiration and dive in so they can hopefully choose a path, a disciplined life of pursuing less. And finally, don't forget that my book, On Purpose Leadership, Master the Art of Leading Yourself so that you can inspire and impact others, is now available for pre-sale on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, anywhere you buy books online. Pre-order, which will drop ship to you on September 22nd. And when you buy the book, On Purpose Leadership, make sure that you forward your receipt to me at dominic@dominicq.com, because in the coming weeks, we'll be sending you free bonuses that can supplement your work with the book, like meditations and exercise sheets that will allow you to put the book into practice. dominic@dominicq.com, and the book is On Purpose Leadership.